I need to explain my 8-day absence. Thank you for tuning into Game Changer TV. I'm your host, Terri Lynn, and this is the channel where every day we're telling it like it is. Today is November 29th, 2025, and I just want to explain to y'all why I have not done a video in 8 days. You go to my page, and the last video I did was November 21st on Marjorie Taylor Greene, and so much has happened since then. I did a video a day before that, and 2 days before that, and 4 days before that, and 4 days before that, and 4 days before that, and 3 days before that. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 videos in the whole month of November, and I haven't done one in 8 days. Where have I been? I have been through hell and back since November 21st, really since November 11th. Let's get into this. So all the faded out spots in November since November 11th has been Josh getting picked up and taken to the hospital. The yellow circle is a doctor visit. So it has been wild. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 days out of the last 18 that he's been involved in the hospitals or the police showing up, 911 getting called, neighbors calling me, Terry, what's going on? The whole RV park looks like a Christmas tree lit up. Another lady called me and said, what's going on over there? Is it the biggest drug deal bust in Rapides Parish? I said, no, they're here for Josh. So the blue days are the days that I did a video on. The yellow is all the medical health emergencies that we've been in. So when you overlay it, wait till we get into this. Wait till we get into this. Okay, so here's episode 474 and episode 475, 476. We're going to get into Josh being missing for 10 hours and solitary confinement. So let's just get into this. I'm lucky I got this many videos out in November with how much chaos was going on. So on November 11th, Josh went missing for 10 hours on November 11th. So I took him on November 11th to the hospital for evaluation because he was very unstable, and they told me I could go home. And Josh had, during that time, that night before I brought him to the hospital, Josh flooded out his toilet in his room, and it flooded out the bathroom and his bedroom, like 3 inches of water. Everything was saturated. So after I dropped him off at the ER, they told me I could go home, and they were going to find him a bed and get him transferred to the mental hospital. So I came home, and I was wet, dry, vacuuming everything up to try to stop any mildew from growing. And so I didn't hear the phone ring until like 30 minutes later. So then I checked my phone, and they told me that Joshua had escaped the emergency room, that it was just 2 nurses and one was pregnant. And Josh jumped out of the bed and pushed the nurses out of the way and ran out the door. And he was in his hospital gown and underwear. So I said, I'm on my way. So that was at 7:55 in the morning. I had called. I said, I'm on my way. So then I called the police department, and I said, hey, are y'all looking for my son? The hospital called me and told me that he escaped from their facilities and wearing only his hospital gown and his underwear. So they told me, well, correction, we found his hospital gown. Now he's only in his underwear. So that turned into a fiasco. So he was missing for 10 hours in the woods with only his underwear on. So we had Allen Parish, Rapides Parish, we had the volunteer fire departments there, we had search and rescue, we had volunteers, we had the dogs, the helicopters, the ATVs, people on the ground. Okay, there was the helicopter. it was going to be 32 degrees that night, and they found him right before 6 o'clock. So it was about 60 degrees, 59, 60 degrees when they found him. And they were concerned because the sun was going down and the temperature was going to start dropping. So they were up against the clock. So they ended up borrowing dogs from different agencies, and their dogs couldn't pick up his scent because too many people had been in the woods. So they had to borrow the hunting dogs and the heat seeking drones from the federal penitentiary in Oakdale, Louisiana. So I was texting people back and forth. This one says, Josh escaped out of their emergency room. The hospital called me and told me that he was just in his hospital gown and his underwear. So then I called the police department and asked them about it. The police told me they were looking for him, but now Josh has thrown away his gown and they found his gown in the woods. So he's just in his underwear. So I went to the police department, said, who saw him go into the woods? They said the pharmacy across the street. So I went into the pharmacy and I asked where he went into the woods at. And they showed me from their window where he went in at. So then I went into the woods with just flip flops and blue jeans on, and thistles and everything was catching me on my blue jeans and on my feet. So I went back out to my car and got my shoes, and I'm like, wow, Josh is out here in just his underwear in these kind of environments. So I was like, Lord, just keep him safe. So the lady at the pharmacy said, well, my husband is the head of the volunteer fire department. They do search and rescue. Do you want me to call him? And I said, yes. So this says, I put in here the exact figure of the number of acres within Oakdale, Louisiana, and the surrounding area is extensively wooded. Okay. So let me show y'all how much woods was in here. When you go to Google Earth, from Google Earth, the circled part is the hospital. The red circle is the hospital, and the woods is what they were searching. So it was a vast amount of land. So let's get some facts about where they were searching for him at. It says, are alligators in the woods behind Oakdale Community Hospital? It is highly likely that alligators could be in the wooded area behind the hospital, as the hospital is located in Louisiana, a state with a large alligator population and ample alligator habitat. Does Louisiana have more alligators than Florida? Yes, Louisiana has more alligators in Florida than Florida. Louisiana has an estimate over 2 million alligators, while Florida's population of alligators is around 1.3 million. This one says, yes, there are alligators in Oakdale, Louisiana. And yes, you can get hypothermia in 50-degree weather if you're outside in only your underwear. So they were worried about him being in his underwear. They were worried about the temperature dropping. They were worried about alligators. They were worried about it was about to get dark. They were worried about his mental health. And I'm the only one in my family that was sitting there watching and waiting and praying. So I was sitting in that driveway watching them with the helicopters and watching the drones go up. And my oldest son called me, and at this point I'd been out there like 9.5 hours. And my oldest son called me and said, Mom, I'm about 15 minutes out. Where you at? And I said, I'm in the parking lot behind the building next to the hospital. He said, okay, I'm on my way. And then I'm telling him everything that happened. And then I said, Sam, wait, hold on. Something's going on. I said, they're all speeding out of here. All the police are speeding out of here like 80 miles an hour out of this parking lot with their lights blazing. I said, I'm going to follow them. So they're flying down the road. And then I started flying behind them. And then they turned on Highway 10 and they were flying down that road. And then they got on the wrong side of the 2-lane road next to the canal. And when I passed by on the right side of the road, there was Josh down in the canal in his underwear. And I stopped and Josh says, hey, Mama. I said, hey, Josh, So, I turned back around. I parked in front of the police car, and then I asked, "Can I give him a hug?" And then Josh was like, "Mama, you know I ran? You know I ran because they said that I was saying this and this and this to you, and I don't remember saying that, Mama, and I thought I was gonna go to prison, and I wouldn't have said it, Mama. It must have been the medicine making me say it." So I said, "Well, this is what's gonna happen, Josh." I said, "You're gonna go back to the same ER that you just escaped from, and then they're gonna reevaluate you for injuries and hypothermia, and then you're gonna get sent to a mental hospital, but you'll be home in a week or two." And he said, "Yes, ma'am." So they brought him back. But I'm not even getting into the emotions of the part, wondering if my son's okay. My son's in his underwear. The thickets were getting on my legs and on my feet, and he was just in underwear, and me praying, "Lord, let him find it. Let him find him, Josh, before the sun goes down." And my son's in freezing cold weather. The emotional aspect that was attached to this. I'm just giving y'all the factual side because I don't want this to be a 10-hour video, how emotional the thing was. But it was quite emotional if you imagine your son or daughter being mentally challenged and lost in the woods for 10 hours in only their underwear that had alligators in there. So November 11th was enough drama for a whole entire lifetime. Well, later that night, they sent Josh to a mental hospital that I went and saw him, I think, on Wednesday night. And it was the biggest hellhole of a hospital, mental hospital that I've ever been in. It was like a pickup bar. It was all young people in their 20s. They were it was girls braiding the guys' hair that worked there. Staff was all like in their 20s. They were not even monitoring the clients. The clients were running up and down the hall. It was like animal farm. It was ridiculous. And Josh was out of his mind. And I was telling him he's not stable. Y'all need to give him a shot. So instead, they put him on solitary confinement. So then I get a letter, a telephone message. "This is Connie, the nurse at this hospital, calling to let you know that we had to put Josh into seclusion last night. No issues. We just had to give him time to calm down because he was dreaming and thought he was in prison." Well, Josh said it was a horrible situation. For 3 days, he was in solitary confinement. He was having to bang on the doors to get out. They wouldn't let him use the bathroom. He was using the bathroom on himself. He said he was treated like an animal. So this was on November 15th, 4 days after the drama in the woods, and he's on isolation. The hospital called me today that Josh has been out of control. They put him in motion. This was voice to text, I think. Oh, they put in a motion to transfer him to another facility, but no bed is available elsewhere. I just called to check on him. He's on the floor in solitary confinement seclusion because of his behaviors. They said they just gave him a blanket. He's in a completely empty room, no bed, and he's banging on the door for them to let him out. And they keep telling him through the door that he cannot come out. So the trauma from that, he said he thought he was losing his mind in there. So the day before he got discharged, this was that Saturday, I just called the hospital and just now and said I was calling to check on Joshua. They said he's doing just fine. I asked if he was still in isolation seclusion, and they said yes, he is. I said I am vehemently opposed to this kind of treatment, and she said, well, he got aggressive and violent to other people in this building that have to be protected. So he's in isolation seclusion. I said, I told y'all day after day that when I was there that he was in a violent state and I could read his face and that he needed his Geodon shot. And she said, well, our doctors practice medicine the way that they see fit. Joshua is his own person and they didn't have to listen to you. I said, I'm his only caregiver and I can read him like a book. And I told y'all that it was going to escalate and that he needed his shot. Well, they didn't do it. So they put him in isolation. I told her that Obama banned the practice of isolation for juveniles because of the psychological damage that it does to juveniles. Well, Josh functions at a 9-year-old level. And so that's a fascinating read if y'all want to go read something. President's ban on solitary confinement is a model for states. It's a fascinating read. So instead of giving Josh the medication that he needed, they just locked him in a room and let him use the bathroom on himself. So I blew a gasket, and they told me that they were going to transfer him to a hospital in Baton Rouge that was in the ghetto. And I say that in the realest kind of way because I'm from the ghetto that they wanted to send him to. I'm from 70805, and that's where they wanted to send him to. BBC did a video on 70805 on YouTube. It's called Visiting the Most Dangerous Zip Code in America. And they wanted to send him there. And I said, "You're not sending him there." And they said, "Well, we already got the ambulance on the way. It'll be here in 2 hours." I said, "I'm about to pull hell down on y'all." I said, "Because you're not going to put my son in a bad situation to where I can't even drive through there being unarmed to go visit my son." I said, "No, it's not going to happen." So I started making telephone calls and everything. And the next morning, they called and told me to come get Josh, that they were discharging him, and he wasn't even stable. So when I picked Josh up, I didn't notice this until the next day, okay? On the Monday, he came home on the Sunday. On the Monday, he was walking funny, and I saw his leg. Well, first I said, "Come here, Josh, why are you walking funny?" So he showed me his leg. His body's cut up all over from being in the woods, and I just happened to notice that he was walking cockeyed, so I checked his foot. So if he would have been laying on that floor in solitary confinement any longer, untreated, it could have been very bad. So the next day, or that night, I brought him to the emergency room, and they said they think it's a bacterial infection, that his leg got punctured and it's infected the soft tissues. And they said I got him to the hospital at just the right time. Now, remember, he went missing in the woods on that Tuesday. I got him on Sunday. So he had been in there 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days with it untreated, with his leg swelling up. So this is where it's going to get crazy. And through this all, God exposed the wicked plan that's bigger than Josh, okay? I said, they think this is at the ER. They think it's a bacteria infection that his leg got punctured when he was in the woods and has infected his soft tissues. They are going to give him a shot of an antibiotic to, uh, I don't know why it says Herman. I was doing voice to text to get it started, okay? Sad that the mental hospital didn't treat it. It could have gotten into sepsis. Yes, untreated or severe cellulitis can turn into sepsis if the infection spreads into the bloodstream. So he was just laying on the floor in solitary confinement with his leg swelling up and nobody treating him. So then when we get to the ER and they said he's got cellulitis that could have turned into sepsis, they prescribed him this medicine. I don't know how to say it. Cefuroxime. I don't know how to say it, but that's what they prescribed him. So before I gave it to him, something told me to look it up. Okay. So I looked it up. Does that antibiotic contain nanoparticles? Yes. Specifically, its prodrug serofrexium can be formulated into nanoparticles. So I'm like, so then I looked up all of his other medications that he takes, and not one of those have nanoparticles in it. So many people take antibiotics, and now it's got nanoparticles in them. And this is where it's going to be good. Because Josh got picked up, sent to the mental hospital, all things work together for good, Romans 8:28. because he got sent to the mental hospital and he escaped and went in the woods, God is exposing what they're doing to our medicine because God told me to look at it before I gave him the first pill. Yes, this medicine can be formulated into nanoparticles, and these nanoparticles are being researched for applications that could extend to the Internet of Bodies. That means connect people to the internet. Although they are not currently used for this purpose. They're not currently used because we haven't connected to it yet. But the technology is going to be in people's bodies from the antibiotic. So this was a deep rabbit hole, and I'm probably going to do a complete separate video on this because there was so much information. Researchers are actively exploring how nanoparticles can be used to help create intra-body nano networks, a form of body area network for advanced health monitoring and targeted treatments. Nanoparticles in that antibiotic are being developed, and their use in future Internet of Bodies is theoretically possible. I said, Josh's left leg is swollen. He has bacteria in the soft tissues from the cut in the woods. The physician emergency certificate or commitment was a minimum of 15 days, and they could have held him as soon as I saw him. They could have held him for the 15 days and kept him in solitary confinement. And as soon as I saw him, I recognized that he was walking crazy and limping. And I asked him what was wrong, and he said that his leg hurt. And I saw that it was swollen up. He would have laid on that floor in solitary confinement because he was in solitary confinement for 4 days. He would have laid on the floor in solitary confinement with cellulitis that could have easily turned into sepsis, and he could have died on that floor in solitary confinement if I did not go make a fit about it. Okay? And so, because of that, God exposed that their plans to connect people to the Internet of Bodies is being put in our medicines. So that was he went missing for the 10 hours. He went to the ER for evaluation. He got held. He escaped. They went searching for him for 10 hours. They find him, bring him back to the hospital. Then they sent him to this other hospital that put him on solitary confinement. Then they sent him back to me with a puncture wound in his leg that's swelling up his whole leg that could have turned into cellulitis. So that was just in 5 days, all that went on. So then the next week, okay, so we saw his doctor, and then let's see if there's anything on this. The doctor wanted to put him back on his Haldol, but he didn't want to go back on the Haldol. But during all this time, he is not stable. He's violent. He's out of control. So on the 24th, he was out of control. He broke the table. I had to fix the table with L brackets. He was talking out of his head. He was saying all kind of stuff. So I hear him outside right now. So he was out of control, very unstable. He had gotten no help from when I tried to seek out help for him on the 11th. And here it is 13 days later. He's still out of control, and I still have not gotten a solution for the first time that I brought him there. So he's out of control. I had to call 911 again. I said, Josh has been unstable all week. Today he broke the dining room table, was not redirectable, attacked me, hit me in the nose. When I let out a scream, he took off running and ran into the woods by our RV park. So my friend said, I'm praying for the Lord to bring help and stabilize Josh and watch over him. So they found him a couple hours. Oh, but let me tell you. So this was just when they first started getting there. Ended up with like 50 people in the RV park. Looked like Merry Christmas tree, lights everywhere. And when the canine the canine unit came, they directed him to me to get some clothes to get Josh's scent. And the officer asked me what my last name was, and I told him. He said, "Didn't we just help find your son just a couple of days ago?" And I said, "Yes." So then they had to find him again. Well, when they found him this time, I found this out after he got out of the hospital. They took him to the hospital this night on the 24th. I found this out that they tased him to get him to the ambulance. So Josh told me it was the hardest tase he's ever gotten in his life. The first tase he got, he was 12 years old, the youngest kid in Rapides Parish. So he told me that this tase that they put on him this time was very painful and it lasted a long time. Y'all, this has been a fictional movie. This has been unreal. This has been the craziest, what, how many days? 18 days, the craziest 18 days. So then he hit me in the nose. He got sent to the emergency room, and then they PEC'd him to another hospital on the 25th. So he was in this hospital on the 25th, and all kind of stuff was going on in that hospital. Okay, he's going to get out on the night of the 29th, the night of the 28th, and then early on the 29th after I get him out, and I got to tell y'all this whole story. He calls 911 on himself no sooner that I get him out. So while he's in the hospital, before he gets out, I have to go get my nose, a CAT scan on my nose because I think my nose is broken, but it wasn't broken. It was just swollen. And that was another whole story. So let me tell you about the story from the 25th through the 28th. That was another whole story. Oh my goodness. So I never went to talk to the doctor. I went 2 or 3 days not talking to nobody. Nobody would talk to me about his medication. I kept telling him he's not stable. The doctor threw out all of the medication that his psychiatrist has treated him with for the last 3 years, and that his psychiatrist in Georgia were treating him with for the last 7 years before that. So the 10-year regimen that he was on, this doctor that had him for one day threw out everything. And so on the 28th, Saturday, this little young girl, about 20 years old, calls and tells me that they put Josh on lithium. She was the social worker. I blew a gasket. I said, "No, you're not going to put my son on lithium. You're not going to put my son on lithium. You're not. That's a first generation psychiatric drug. No, we're not doing that." So she's like, "Well, the doctor chose to do it." I said, "I don't care. I'm telling you, my son is not going to do it." I said, "There's going to be hell to pay. You are not going to put that in my son and make his brain mush from lithium. You're not putting that metal in my son." So we started arguing, and then she's going to tell me, and she sounded like she's about 20-year-old little sorority girl, and she's going to tell me, "Ma'am, just breathe." I said, "Little girl, you don't tell me to just breathe." I said, "I'm probably older than your mama. You're telling me you're putting lithium in my son, and I'm telling you, you are not. You do not have the right to tell me to calm down and breathe." I about lost it, okay? So I ended up telling her everything that Josh had been on. I told her that I wanted to talk to the doctor. I get off the phone and I write an email to the CEO of that hospital, um, Ernest Shadow, and I sent a nice long email about everything that was going on and how that they were playing fast and loose and negligent, just throwing out uh, a certified psychiatrist work. And she was a psychiatrist for 35 years. And this doctor that's only known Josh for one day just arbitrarily threw away everything this doctor had used to stabilize Josh. And now he was going to do what he wanted to do. So then I looked up reviews on this doctor and included it to that CEO. Says, has left my dad on a psych hold for over a week at Christus Carini Hospital, has done nothing to help his condition. 0 stars. Complaints have been put in. Rudest doctor I've ever encountered. He did nothing but make my condition worse. So I was livid. So I talked to her about 4 o'clock. Then right after that, I sent the email. At 8:30 on Saturday, this past Saturday, I get a call and the man says, yes, my name's Robert, from the hospital. And I said, oh, I've dealt with you before. And he goes, yeah, I think so. He said, I'm just calling to let you know that we no longer have Joshua. We have discharged him into the custody of Alexandria Police Department, and he is now with them. I said, what does that mean? He said, we have discharged Josh from our facilities, and he is now in the custody of Alexandria Police Department. So I about lost it after I just argued with this girl, and then they're going to throw Josh out, and he's on another PEC hold, and you're not supposed to release that client until they're stable. And these people, he got threw out on the 16th, and then now here it is on the 28th, another hospital's throwing him out. So I called the Alexandria Police Department and I talked to a sergeant, and he was livid. He said, let me tell you what went on. He said, Joshua got into it with another patient in there. And and I had been telling her, do not put him on the lithium. Do not put him on the lithium. I said, I've seen him on all these different kind of medicines. Do not put him on it. And they did anyway. So that was at 4 o'clock. So then I get a call at 8:30 that they kicked him out. So I called the police and they said, well, this is what happened. Josh attacked another person that was in there, and the staff has kicked him out. And he said, first staff at the hospital called us wanting us to come in and make an arrest. And we said, we're not stepping into a mental health facility to make an arrest on a mental person who's receiving treatment. We're not getting in that. We're not doing it. And they said, well, he attacked another person and this person might want to press charges. And the police said, well, when that person gets out of the hospital, they can come to our station and file a complaint, but we're not coming into the mental health facility. So they were arguing back and forth. Then the hospital called the mayor of Alexandria and was demanding that he gets his chief of police to get somebody out there. And this sergeant was livid about how the whole thing went down. So then the mayor sent them to the hospital over my son. The hospital wanted the Alexandria Police Department to disarm and leave their guns in the car to come up there. And the officer said, no, we don't disarm for nobody. So they ended up going into the security room and seeing footage from the floor. And they said, that's a simple battery. No, we're not getting in on that. And so they left, and the hospital wrote up the discharge papers on Josh, and then was making calls back to the mayor to get them to come out again. And they're all arguing back and forth. The hospital, the mayor, and the police department are all arguing over what to do with my son, and I'm just trying to get him stable. So then the police show up, and so they're telling me all this on the phone. And the police show up, and they the pol- the hospital told the police, well, y'all need to come here just for an escort out of the building. So the police show up and Josh comes out, and the police tell Josh he's not under arrest. And then they said that the hospital said on their camera, on their security cameras, he's being discharged to y'all. And the Alexandria Police Department said, no, let's clarify. We're not taking custody over him. Y'all are releasing him from y'all's facility, and he's not coming into our care. So the policeman told me to come on down to the police department, and they would file a complaint about the hospital discharged Josh for 2 hours earlier than they let him out of the building, and they would not let him out of the building until the police came. And so the sergeant is writing up a report right now and a complaint against the hospital for holding a person, basically kidnapping them against their will. So he's writing up that report for Monday. So while I'm on my way to get there, I said, "Well, where's Josh at now?" He said, "I don't know. He's on the street somewhere." And it's 9 o'clock at night, and it's not a safe city. We'll get to that in a minute. So while I'm on my ways there, I get a call from a number that I don't know. Well, let me put this out there. Says, yes or no, at 9 o'clock at night in Alexandria, Louisiana, is it safe? Generally, your chances of being a victim of crime, including robbery or mugging, go up after 9 p.m. in Alexandria compared to the daytime. Alexandria has a significantly higher crime rate overall, while some general property crimes are more common during the day. Violent crimes and street robberies tend to peak in the late evening and early morning between 9 p.m. and 12 a.m. Based on general crime statistics for the city, the area around St. Francis Cabrini Hospital may be considered less safe, particularly at night. Alexandria, Louisiana has a high violent property crime rate compared to national averages. It has been ranked as one of the most dangerous cities in the United States in various reports. The entire city has a high crime rate with a risk of becoming a victim of a violent crime around 1 in 51. Alexandria has a violent crime rate that is 260% higher than the state average for property crime rate. Okay? Need for caution. Due to the high crime rates, it is advisable to exercise extra caution after 10 p.m. So the hospital threw a person out who is autistic with a 72 IQ to the streets after 9 o'clock at night where it's violent. Okay. So while I'm on my way to the hospital, I get a call. It says, I just called the police department. They refused to arrest Josh in the hospital, and the hospital just put him on the street. Okay. They just put him out like trash. So while I'm on the way, I get a call from a number I don't know, and it's a black man at 9:30 at night calling me. And he was the nicest guy. I think he was an angel, honestly. Says, I just called the police department. They refused to arrest him in the hospital. They put him on the street, just released him to the street. So the police called me and told me to come make a report against the hospital, and they'll enter Josh into the be on the lookout system. So then while I'm talking to him, I get a missed call from somebody number that I don't know. And I called it back, and it was a black man, and he said he was calling for Josh. Okay. And he didn't know where Josh was. He didn't know where Josh was when I called him back. And I said, "Well, where's the last place you saw him?" And he said, "Around Target, but I left." So he said, "I'll go drive around and look for him." Y'all, I didn't know this black man from anybody. And he said, I could tell when he came up to me and asked if he could borrow my phone that, he was a special individual. And so, I'm just worried about him. So I think it was an angel. So then I'm texting this lady in California, sister in the Lord, and she said, "Oh my God, hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. Another miracle from God to answered prayer. You can share later what has happened, but Jesus has sent his chariots of fire and angels unaware to protect Joshua and bring him back home." That black man was an instrument in getting Joshua. Y'all, this guy had no interest in Josh. He just called me, and he called me like 4 times asking me if I found Josh. And I said no. And he said, "Well, I'm going to keep driving around looking for him. He's not safe out here on these streets." Tell me that wasn't God. So then I'm driving around. And so I called my ex husband. My ex husband's like, "You should drive around before you go file a report. You don't know how long that's going to take." So then the black guy calls me and he's like, "Ma'am, did you find Josh yet?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, I'm going to go over here by GameStop." And I said, "Okay, I'm going over by the traffic circle." So me and the guy are still on the phone together. And I said, I think I see him. I think I see him. And it was pitch dark. I said, what was he wearing? He said, a purple shirt. And Josh went there in a t-shirt. So he was wearing something from the hospital. I said, it's dark, but I think it's him. I said, is he carrying a white bag? And the guy said, yes, ma'am. I said, that's him. That's him. I said, he's over here by Aspen Dental. So the guy was getting all excited with me that I found Josh. So then I got Josh in the car and I said, Josh, we got to go to the police station. And Josh said, are y'all going to put me back in the hospital? I said, no, Josh, you're not going back in the hospital. I said, we got to go fill out a report for how they treated you there. So then I went and met with the sergeant and the man who got Josh out of there. And they were all upset how Josh got treated in there. So me and the Alexandria Police Department sergeant were texting just about all night because Josh has not gone to sleep yet. He said, I totally agree. I'm sorry you're going through this. I had to redact somebody's name and what the hospital is doing to you, especially how they use law enforcement to an extent that I fought against until I was ordered to send in a unit. I was very specific, though, when I told my officer we were only there as an escort to standby. They still tried to pin it on us, and my officer quickly on body camera corrected security and told them that Joshua was more discharged from their custody than into our custody. I said, you are the best, serve and protect. So then I sent him a picture. I said, this is Josh that the hospital threw out like trash. Somebody functioning at that level into a violent city. He said, yes, you are correct. What they are doing. It passed several officers. It's supposed to be it pissed. It pissed several officers and dispatchers what happened tonight off. Maybe when he gets stable, you can bring him back to the headquarters to meet everyone who now knows him and cares. Then he texts me, he says, I'm going to get some rest and I have to get up early to talk to my chief about everything. You need to get some rest. I will be praying. I will message later about the conversation. So during the last 18 days, he's escaped from the hospital, went missing in the woods, got cut up, had basically a staph infection coming up, went on solitary confinement, went to the ER over the leg, missing again, another K9 unit, back to the mental hospital. The social worker put him on lithium, calling the mayor, getting the mayor involved, throwing him to the street, a be on the lookout. And then no sooner I get him home on the 28th, on the 29th, a few hours later, he calls 911 himself and says he's running away. And so then the police show back up at my house at 1 o'clock in the morning, and that was another situation. But then I text my friend. I said, Joshua is not hindering my ministry. He is part of the ministry. If any man wants to follow after Jesus, he must take up his cross daily and follow him. This burden that God has given me with Josh is part of my testing, and I can't say, Lord, this yoke is too heavy for me. I'm taking it off. I'm not going to carry this cross. This is part of building my suffering, my keeping no records of wrong done to me. This is part of my development, fruit with kindness and long suffering and patience. I can't say I can't deal with Josh because I've got work to do. He is part of that plan to develop me more into the image of God, to extend the mercy of God to another human being on a continual basis, and learning to die to myself daily for another person and for Jesus Christ to live through me. So I text my friend in Tennessee and she said, how are you? How is he today? I said, he woke up a little psychotic, but that whole experience was very traumatic. So just keep praying until this settles down. Thank you. I love you. She said, my class asked about y'all yesterday. It is our privilege to pray for you both. I love you too. I said, the answer is not in a doctor. We know that. The answer is not in a hospital. We know that. The answer is in the great physician, Jesus alone. There is no worldly solution or answer for Josh, only the Lord Jesus Christ. And the word says in Proverbs 31:8, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. This passage is a call to be an advocate for the voiceless and to stand up for justice, particularly for the vulnerable and the oppressed. And I forgot to put it in there, but Micah 6:8 says, according to the Bible, the Lord requires you to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And so Proverbs tells us to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves and to defend them. The passage is a call to be an advocate for the voiceless and to stand up for justice, particularly for the vulnerable and the oppressed. I think that's a check, a check, a check, a check, a check, a check. This passage is found near the end of the book of Proverbs and is part of a mother's wise teaching to her son. So within 18 days, Josh has been to the ER for an eval, and he escaped and had the hunting dogs, the helicopters, the ATVs, the drones. Went back to the ER for placement. Josh went to the ER for his punctured leg. Oh, and then he went back to the ER again for placement for the last time. And then I went to the then he had to go, to the ER for his leg. Then I had to go to the ER for my nose. It's been an indescribable 18 days. And now today, the last couple of days, oh, and when I went to have my nose looked at, my blood pressure was 200/100. They said I was at stroke level. So for the last couple of days, my left arm has been hurting extremely bad. Like somebody's got an ace bandage wrapped around it so hard, or either a car has come and parked on my arm. It's running all the way down my arm, and now my thumb is going numb. So it has been a wild 18 days. And y'all, I've got like 50 videos on the drawing board that I'm needing to get to. I haven't been able to do anything. I haven't been able to really clean my house. I've been coming and going here and there to the hospitals, to the streets looking for him, to the police station, to the other hospital. It's been chaotic. I haven't had time to get to the store. It's been a madhouse. So I apologize that I've not been able to get to a video, but y'all please pray for me. Pray that things calm down. Pray that we get a solution, and just cover me in prayer, because I am getting attacked from everywhere, from Josh to my own health to everything. So, and pray that I can get back on the videos. I want to talk about the Genesis Act, the Genesis mission. I want to talk about the nanoparticles that are in the vaccines and what the plans are for that. I want to talk about the mandatory digital IDs that are coming. So, y'all, please pray that God can get me back on track to finish the work that He's called me to do with this. I love y'all. Thank you for watching. If you appreciate the content that you find on this channel, would you prayerfully consider supporting the channel?